It matters. Facts matter. Accuracy matters. Objectivity matters. Fairness matters. Balance matters. Accountability matters. Equality matters. History matters. News matters. Your view. Your future. Your world. It matters.
Hello everyone and welcome to World News Day 2019.
In the next half hour, we will be celebrating works from professional news organizations and the impact they have on the communities they serve.
That's right, Alyssa. Now the show is jointly organized by the World Association of Newspaper and News Publishers, the Straits Times, and supported by the Google News Initiative.
That's right. But before we kick things off, let's hear from the person on the street what they think about journalism.
Can you describe journalism in one word?
That's really difficult. I don't know if I can.
Dangerous.
Exciting.
Honesty.
Creative.
Interesting.
Freedom.
Information.
And what about you?
Awareness.
Truth. Biased.
Hard-hitting.
Controversial.
Propaganda.
Informative.
Keep up the good work. Keep informing us. If we're not informed, the world's a poorer place.
Well, we've heard what the public thinks of journalism. Let's talk to someone who has the inside knowledge of journalism, and from who else but Mr. Warren Fernandez, the Editor-in-Chief of the Straits Times.
He also happens to be the president of the World Editors Forum, which he can tell us more about. Hi Warren.
Hi.
Thank you for making the time to come on the show today. So we'd like to know, what is World News Day and why was it created?
Well, World News Day is all about celebrating journalism. If you go to the World News Day website, you will see fairly inspiring stories of journalists who are helping to shape policy, expose wrongdoings, corruption or sexual abuse, or just lift communities, inspire communities. And that's what we do day in and day out. And we really want to showcase this to the world, to tell people that this is what we do and why we do it. So that's why we started this project, to get newsrooms together to showcase professional journalism.
Now the slogan for World News Day is Real News Matters.
That's
Can you
right.
tell us why this slogan was chosen?
Well, we were bouncing around various ideas, and finally we felt that, with so much fake news out there, it's just proliferating. People are getting it on their phones and they're wondering if this is true. Sometimes they share it even without knowing whether it's true or not. And we wanted to show that there's a difference between what professional newsrooms do and the information that's just flowing out there. Because before we publish anything, we would go through a very elaborate process of fact-checking and verification and cross-checking. And it's a lot of work that goes into it. It's a costly business. And we feel that it's important that we showcase this work because we need to get societies behind this effort to show that, if you don't have good journalism in your society, you can't have serious debates.
Once again, thank you so much, Warren, for coming onto the show. To start things off with our celebration today of World News Day 2019. As for this show, we'll be focusing on a handful of these stories, finding out more about the thought processes that went into bringing them to life.
And it is perhaps appropriate to start with Hong Kong, a city that has been front and center in news cycles all over the world.
On 1st of July, protesters have stormed into the legislature, the Legislative Council of Hong Kong, but the intention was not entirely clear. It also leaves some media a little bit confused, because why choose that day? Why choose this way of expressing what they want, given that the outstanding extradition bill is already being shelved? We want to find a voice of this entire movement, and Brian Leung is the only person who removed his face mask. So we want to find out what's happening. Why do they do this? Is violence even acceptable in that very context? In that interview, he explained himself, his intention, why he hold no regrets, because he felt removing his face mask and ask everyone to leave was needed at that moment to try to make sure the movement goes on. That interview, when it was published, helped explain, helped fill the void, in a sense, to why protesters still need to resolve to this kind of more radical measures, which has never happened before in Hong Kong.
There you have it. For the full video, you can watch it on www.worldnewsday.org.
For now, we have the chief news editor from the South China Morning Post, Mr. Yondan Latu, joining us to discuss the effects of the Hong Kong protests and the journalists who risked their lives in the name of news gathering.
Welcome, Mr. Latu. So we'd like to know, so for Alvin's story, who decided on that angle and why?
In keeping with the workings of a normal newsroom, so we have a bunch of editors, senior editors, middle-ranking editors. We discuss story angles. We discuss story angles with the reporters, and we decide on how it should be done. In this particular case, we wanted to do something which was, this was an illegal invasion of the Legislative Council, and the people who were doing this were breaking the law. We needed to be careful on how we did this story. We wanted to tell our readers, we wanted to tell our viewers what is actually going on, what's motivating these young people, and this was a good case to show that. Now, in terms of the angle and everything, it was important that we don't provide them with a platform to talk about illegal stuff. We wanted to understand them, and that's why I decided on this particular angle.
Now, there are many sides and parts to the Hong Kong protests. So how do you ensure that the paper, that you guys are having a fair and balanced approach when covering the Hong Kong protests?
Okay, that's a good question. If you look at the Western media coverage of the Hong Kong protests so far, you will see a distinct bias and a distinct common narrative. It goes along the lines that these are freedom fighters, they're being repressed by China in Hong Kong, and this is a natural progression that they're lashing out, and they're often hailed as heroes. If you look at our newspaper, the South China Morning Post has been covering this extensively. Our coverage is more comprehensive, more nuanced, more balanced than any other news outlet right now. And you'll understand that it is not that simple. It's not just a matter of freedom fighters fighting repression. There's a lot of elements involved over here. And plus, we don't gloss over the violence. We bring you every aspect of it. And that is the trick here, where we need to explain this story in such a way that we bring out the legit grievances of these protesters, but at the same time, we don't gloss over the excesses and the carnage that they're causing.
Thank you, Yondan, for joining us. Now, Yondan is the chief news editor from the South China Morning Post. Now, he was just sharing with us about his team covering the Hong Kong protests that have been ongoing for weeks and even months now.
We should definitely not underestimate the power of journalism.
Since we're on this topic, Alyssa, the Philippine Daily Inquiry uncovered the PhilHealth Fund scandal based on some sources that was sent to them with supporting documents.
When a source first came to me with documents about corruption in PhilHealth, this is the state insurance agency, I knew this was a story we needed to pursue. The information was shocking because there were claims for ghost dialysis treatments or treatments for patients who have long been dead. And so we made an investigative report. We decided to make a series, and we were able to come up with 24 stories in all in the span of a month. In July of 2019, in his State of the Nation address, the President singled out the PhilHealth scam as an example of systemic corruption that he wanted to weed out.
The recent uncovering of the massive fraud perpetrated against the public health insurance system proves that corruption is pervasive. I am grossly disappointed.
The whistleblowers were very reluctant to speak to me. I had to give them a lot of reassurance that they will be safe, that their story will be told accurately, and that they were doing the right thing. Because they were afraid against going up against very powerful people.
For us in the Inquirer, this is a validation of the value of good journalism to the community and the country, exposing the web of corruption so that public funds and public interests are protected and corrupt officials are held accountable.
Now, for the full video, of course, you can watch it on worldnewsday.org.
And now we have an interview with the PH Daily Inquirer executive editor himself, Mr. Joseph Volt Contreras. Volt, Hi.
Hi there.
Yes.
Hi, nice to see you.
Thanks for making the time.
Yeah.
So we want to ask you, what was your first thought when you realized you had such a big scoop on your hands?
This is the kind of series that we haven't had for a long while. Again, it became possible after two whistleblowers approached the Inquirer, and it says a lot about who we are, what do we stand for in the Philippine media today. For the past 33 years, the Inquirer has built a reputation as shall I say, a go-to guy for people with grievances. And it's a nice, my main takeaway here is that, we are still top of mind for whistleblowers.
And Volt, tell us more about the challenges, that your team faced when covering this story.
Being able to get the other side of the field health, especially field health executives, because of course secrets are being spilled out, and especially on the part of the clinic being accused of fraud, there was no immediate response. We were at one point being the threat of being libel suits crossed my mind.
Thank you so much, Volt, for spending some time with us to share with us more about the PhilHealth fund scandal. Once again, thank you, Volt.
While the PH Daily Inquiry's story was and is impactful, there are also strong examples from the participating newsrooms for World News Day.
We are now joined by Kulan Juga, Editor-in-Chief from UB Live and Garrick Magazine, Mongolia.
And Ashwini Srivastava, Assistant Editor from Press Trust India.
As they both are currently with the Asia Journalist Fellowship, we'd like to hear their thoughts on the power of journalism. Welcome, Kulan and Ashwini.
Hi both. Thank you. Thanks for coming. So we'd like to ask the both of you, what is your definition of the phrase power of journalism? You start?
The power of journalism to do good for society is immense. It is a powerful tool for any civilian to bring about what's wrong in the society for the betterment of the people. It brings about a story of corruption. It brings about issues with the civic authority so that larger people who are the receiving side, they can get their voice heard. I mean, true journalism, the power of journalism is to give voice to the voiceless, just to act as a spokesman of the deprived people so that their aspiration and problem can be brought to the notice of government that be. So journalism has huge power to be a voice of many people and to do something good for the society and ultimately for the country.
Kulan, what about yourself? What is the power of journalism?
Yeah, I agree with Ashwini, and I would say maybe like power of journalism is, I would say it's a bridge between the people need to be heard as well, and also like journalists are reporting all those problems that needs to be solved, so the decision makers or those people, so it's the bridge between those people. So I would say power of journalism is there.
Certainly, I can feel the passion from both of you radiating from where you are.
So once again, thank you Kulan and Ashwini for joining us here, to celebrate our World News Day. Really, it's so nice to see our counterparts from all over the world, sharing their experiences with us.
And to hear how it's like in another part of the world.
Exactly. And you see, Alyssa, the next story is one that most Singaporeans would be familiar with.
We are all under the impression that you can claim quite substantially from MediShield. But when I got a bill, I was quite shocked. After the government subsidy, I could only get $4.50. I said, that looks very ridiculous. I was wondering, how do I get people to know that I got $4.50 only? I thought, well, the best way is to get through to the media. Then I remembered that Selma, the senior health correspondent, and she's the best choice to reach the public. Sama did a wonderful job of covering my case. It seems there's a lot of response from the public, not happy about the $4.50, and there's a chain reaction after that,
Now for the full video, you can visit our website at worldnewsday.org.
And here we have with us none other than Salma, the journalist responsible for restoring that man's smile. So Salma, tell us, how did this story begin?
Well, it all started when I received this letter from Mr. Xiao. It gives in great detail his bill and the subsidy he received, as well as the insurance coverage, right? And he could not understand why he only received $4.50. And he asked me, is there something wrong? So I looked at it and I thought, yes, you know, it didn't sound reasonable. How can you get such a small amount from your insurance, which is supposed to cover big bills?
And of course, Salma, you know, clearly you were liaising with a lot of different agencies, a lot of to and fro, a lot of legwork. Were there at any point in time where you felt that, you know, it was too much for you to handle? What were some of the challenges, you know, that you faced while pursuing this story?
Okay, it wasn't so much too much to handle.
Yeah.
But, you know, there was this stonewalling because everybody said there's nothing wrong. And if there's nothing wrong, what are you pursuing the matter for? Right? But to me, you know, I've been covering healthcare for 20 years now, and it did not sound like there was nothing wrong. So then I asked them, could you walk me through the process? Show me how you arrived at these. And they were very cooperative. And the Health Ministry actually went to the eye center and checked all their bills. And that was how they found out that the eye center was charging too much.
So once again, thank you so much, Salma, for sharing with us your story.
Thank you.
Thank you, Salma. So Jan, so far we've been talking about the power of journalism. And we spoke to journalists who not only risk personal safety on the front lines or handled enormous responsibility for their stories, but you know what? We shouldn't forget another responsibility that we journalists have to handle: meeting deadlines.
This is what we do. This is the distance we go.
Those were your news headlines from the Straits Times.
Because real news matters.
But now, in this day and age, there are other ways to consume news other than reading a physical newspaper. We're now in a digital age where there are many other mediums for news and everything is easily available on our smartphones.
And of course, with this convenience comes an array of challenges, and that is exactly what we are going to discuss in this segment with two of our correspondents from the ST Newsroom, Rohit and Rachel. Tell us, you know, how long have you been a journalist for, and really, which year did you guys start out, and how did it all begin?
When I went straight after college, I am actually from Calcutta in India, but I was in Bombay. I finished college, went straight into journalism. I knew nothing. I was not very good at it. It was an incredibly different era, obviously, to the one that we work in now, because I was working on a lumbering typewriter, and you know, nowadays people are always talking about, you know, when they go out and their laptops and the batteries dying. I mean, for us, it's your ribbon getting ruined, and you know, so when you go on assignment, always take an extra ribbon. And you know, just it's just different. But I think it was a journalism that taught you a couple of interesting things. One is there were no mobile phones, of course, and I'm talking about 1985, which is when I started. There were no mobile phones, so you actually had to go and meet people a lot. And I think it gave, that was a different type of thing. I think there was no WhatsApping and texting people or whatever. You had to meet them. So I think it helped you understand people better when you see them face to face. So it was a different type of journalism, and I enjoyed that part of it.
Rachel, you know, representing us.
Yeah, so I became a journalist on the 29th July 2013. But I was already interning as early as in 2009. And I think that it's quite obvious the change that ST has made. For one, I think the older folks in the newsroom realize that you have to get on board the digital train sooner rather than later. I had to think for a while when Rohit said ribbon, man. I was like, what are you talking about? For us, this is it. This is our all-in-one. It's my recorder. If I forget to bring my Sony out, I type faster on this rather instead of writing it out on shorthand. I know. Probably Rohit is judging me as I say this.
I'm judging you.
Yes. It's also my camera, and all the cameras are so good nowadays. So this is literally the only thing I need. I don't even need to bring my handbag. I don't even bring my handbag for as a prop. and it's effectively, this is your office now. But I think the basics of journalism still stand for us. I mean, like what Rohit said about talking, researching, that's very much still part of it, just that maybe we can do it faster.
And you know, talking about that, of course, technology is one that has changed the gameplay for our job. What else, you know, do you guys reckon that that threatens, as it were, journalism now?
But I think the threats, I mean, obviously, I think, you know, when I grew up, you know, and of course I had a romantic view of journalism, and I loved these writers who presented the world to me and explained the world to me, and I believed them. I think that is the most important thing. I believe them. But I think now, fake news and WhatsApp forwards, I think that's really the biggest issue, is that people need to believe newspapers again. And I think it's very important that newspapers have to hold themselves to a certain standard. Got to verify facts, got to have all that sort of stuff. So for me, that's the most important thing, that newspapers have to return to being the place where people believe. But it's hard, you know, also because I think attention spans is another threat, you know. I think sometimes newspapers are actually competing with dog and cat videos because people are just looking at them on the train. I can see that, you know, if this story, I don't like it, I'm just swiping and going on to some video and then swiping. So I think there are some, you know, it's a tough world out there, I think, for news.
I'm going to add another fear to that. I think the whole idea of confirmation bias. So I think I would probably consider myself a little bit more liberal. So I have to constantly check myself that even on Facebook, if I see somebody who is a little bit more hawkish, conservative in their views, I try not to roll my eyes. I have to look at it, be very careful, consider their views. I think there are many people who they may not read the papers as often as we do because it's our job. And as a result, you actually end up surrounding yourself in an echo chamber. And then you just keep reinforcing. You know, if platforms like social media, is very easy for it to just feed and give you the same thing over and over again.
Because of the algorithm as
exactly.
well, right?
So then, you know, as somebody navigating the world, if you don't have trusted sources, and I don't just mean even, I would say the Straits Times is one good avenue, but I do think you need to find other trusted sources as well to reinforce and boost that. Otherwise, if you're going to rely on some random stranger's views, then, you know, how do you know the information is correct? So that's scary.
Thank you, Rachel and Rohit again for coming on to the show. On to our next segment, now forced into slavery at the age of 16, Pachamal is no stranger to physical and verbal abuse.
நாங்கள் வேலை செய்கிற இடத்துல வந்து சாப்பாடுலாம் குழம்புலாம் வச்சதே இல்லை சார். ஆமாம் சார், அரிசி மட்டும் போட்டு கஞ்சி காசு. காலையிலே வெடிகாலமாக 4 மணிக்கெலாம் வந்து ஓனர் எல்லாரையும் கல் அடிக்கிறதுக்கு கூப்பிடுவாரு. நாங்கள் ரிலீஸ் ஆகிட்டு வந்ததுக்கப்புறமா இந்த வேலை தான் சார் செஞ்சுன்னு இருக்கிறோம். களை பறிக்கிறது, அதோட எங்கே கூலி வேலை கிடைக்குதோ களை வெட்டுறதுக்கு, இந்தமாரி வேலைலாம் செஞ்சுன்னு இருக்கோம் சார். நாங்களாம் அவங்க எந்த வேலைக்கு கூப்பிட்டாலும் நாங்களாம் போய் செய்வோம். எங்களை எந்த வேலைக்கும் கூப்பிடாமலே இருந்தது கிடையாது சார். 300 ரூபாய் கிடைக்கும், 350 ரூபாய் கிடைக்கும் சார். நாங்கள் வந்து 100 பேருக்கு மேலே மீட் எடுத்துருக்கோம் சார். 100 பேருக்கு மேலே மீட் எடுத்து அவங்கவுங்க ஊரில் விட்டுருக்கோம். அவங்க எவ்வளோ துன்பத்தை அனுபவிச்சிருப்பாங்க. ஒரு நல்லதை கெட்டதுக்கு எதுக்குமே போயிருக்க மாட்டாங்க. நிம்மதியான சாப்பாடு இருந்திருக்காது. இதெல்லாம் எங்களுக்கு தெரியும். ஏன்னா நாங்களும் அந்தமாரி கொத்தடிமையாக கஷ்டப்பட்டோம்னால, அதனால எங்களுக்கு தெரியும். எனக்கு எவ்வளோ பேர் தெரியுமோ அவ்வளோ பேரை காப்பாற்றலாம் அப்படின்னு நினைக்கிறேன் சார்.
Wow, certainly that was an inspiring story, and we have Ritu Kapoor here with us for an interview. Hi, Ritu.
Hi, Ritu.
Hi. Hi.
Well, certainly what a story that was. Could you tell us more about the Queen's Me the Change campaign?
So the Queen's Me the Change campaign was born ahead of our general elections in 2019. It's been an issue that's been bothered me always, that when it comes to coverage for elections, the cameras tend to not get the voices of the women. And we also knew that this year, the first time women voter would comprise a significant electorate and could therefore use a platform like the Quint to voice the concerns. Now, very, very rarely are women's issues highlighted in manifestos of election parties during campaigns. So the idea was to front end women's issues through the women themselves.
And Ritu, let's shift the focus to Patri Amal. How difficult was it, to gain her trust, to get her to tell her story?
As you can imagine, for somebody who's been in bondage slavery from the age of 16, it doesn't come easy for her to trust anyone. That was one aspect. The other was she had, by the time our cameras reached her, she's sort of been trained to parrot a certain kind of narrative if a camera appeared in front of her. So what Vikram did was fairly prolonged, but was worth it. That he made almost 4 visits to her village without a camera, just to hang around her, just to spend time with her, just to win her trust, along with his camera person, but without any equipment, without any devices.
Thank you so much, Ritu.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Our next inspiring story is someone who champions interfaith work and the vulnerable.
This person was named the Straits Times Singaporean of the Year 2018, and she is none other than Ms. Siti Nur Mastura. She is 29 and the founder of non-profit organizations Interfaith Youth Circle and Back to Basics.
One day I came back home after my O-level exam, and I saw my mom, she was just screaming and saying, I can't do this anymore. After the divorce, everything just spiraled downwards to the point where, we were homeless, we had to move house to house, and at the end we actually went into interim housing. That was when I think I saw a lot of people staying in the rental housing, and the conditions were not, they're not a place where you will want to raise your family or your children. Back to Basics, essentially what we do is we basically give underprivileged families free groceries every month. And the idea is that on top of whatever they're going through, we didn't want families to go to sleep hungry at night. In January 2019, we would actually have 50 families in our database that we are working, not just giving them groceries, but we are also looking into 3 areas. So education, employment, and empowerment. There were a number of families that actually successfully dropped out of our system. So they're no longer dependent on our groceries. It's not just inspiring, but it's also empowering for these families to know that, they can get out and they can then become sources of good themselves and, contribute back to the community. I faced what I faced, and I didn't want anyone else to go through that experience. And if I could do something about that, then why not?
And of course, we have Mastura with us here. Thank you, Mastura, for coming to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Pleasure. Mastura, can you tell us more about your inspiring story?
So both the organizations actually stemmed from a personal experience. So with Back to Basics, it was what I experienced when I was 17 years old, and after my parents had a divorce. We experienced homelessness, and the main part of that entire experience being food insecurity. So that's when I actually experienced nights, like me, my sisters, my mum, where we would go with eating very little food or even not eating at all. And the area that I lived in, there were so many kids as well. And just I think seeing that at least I had the maturity to sort of deal with my situation, but these kids, they didn't have that. And that was when I decided, okay, if I ever get out of this situation, this is something I really want to tackle. And with Interfaith Youth Circle, it was also the idea of how it was in 2014 when ISIS was, at the peak of like every news, and I guess the spotlight being on Islam and how things were just taken out of context a lot of the times. And then knowing that this was also happening to people of other religions, like how Muslims view Jews, for example, or even Christianity and all the other religions. And then having my ex-schoolmate Dania experiencing the same thing as well, and so we decided to start Interfaith.
And Mastura, congratulations! You were our Straits Times Singaporean of the Year.
Thank you.
And tell us, how do you think winning this award has helped to inspire others?
Well, I think that's kind of the power of, because really what was
told to everyone else, apart from just me winning the award, was actually the story behind winning the award. And I think that was, every time you tell someone's stories, especially the deepest, darkest stories, that's the most powerful thing, because there are a lot of people who experience it and they think they're alone in what they go through. So when I was going through what I went through with my family, I thought I was the only one, because none of my schoolmates were going through that. But now, you know, having my story out there, there's a lot of people, especially when I give talks in school and I talk about my story, like the divorce, so many girls come up to me, so many boys tell me how they have attempted suicide before, or, you know, what they're going through with their family and how hard it is. But, you know, hearing my story, hearing how I navigated through those challenges, that becomes motivation for them, you know.
Thank you, Mastura, for spending some time with us here at the studio, and certainly congratulations once again for winning the Straits Times Singaporean of the Year, and of course your marriage as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Now, before we bid you goodbye, we'd like to thank all the participating newsrooms involved in this year's World News Day and the journalists who came on the show to share their experiences.
Their experiences are truly inspiring, and may this gumption continue so that stories can continue to be uncovered, because really, real news matters.
Do remember to log on to worldnewsday.org for a host of content from all participating newsrooms.
Once again, I'm Haryanto.
And I'm Melissa.
On behalf of all the participating newsrooms and us, Happy World News Day.